You are listening to RudolfSteinerAudio.com. If you are listening to the podcast of this, it is located at rudolfsteiner.podbean.com. Please consider becoming a patron. This is a reading of a cycle of lectures by Rudolf Steiner entitled Harmony of the Creative Word, the Human Being and the Elemental, Animal, Plant and Mineral Kingdoms, 12 lectures by Rudolf Steiner in 4 parts. A revised translation by Matthew Barton, formerly known as Man as Symphony of the Creative Word, Collected Works, Volume 230. This is Part 1, which consists of 3 lectures around the theme Man's Connection with the Cosmos, the Earth, and the Animal World. Lecture 1, given on the 19th of October, 1923. It has often been said in our studies, and it has also been evident in the recent lectures on the 4 seasons and the archangels, that in their form and structure, in the conditions of their life, and indeed in every respect, human beings are a whole world, a microcosm as distinct from the macrocosm. All the laws and all the secrets of the world are to be found in them. This is, of course, an abstract way of putting it, and it will be far from easy to get at the real meaning of it. We'll need to enter into the many secrets of world and cosmos, and then see how we find them again in the essential human being. Today we'll examine the world and then the human being from certain points of view, and we may then discover how the microcosm of the human being relates to the macrocosm. Anything we are able to say about the macrocosm can, of course, only refer to a small part of it. To present the whole of it, our studies would have to traverse the whole world. Let us begin by considering what is immediately above us, the part of our environment where the animal kingdom lives in the air, and specifically the creatures that are most obviously living in the air, the birds. It cannot escape us that the birds which live in the air, finding the essentials of life in the air, have quite a different form from animals that live either on or beneath the ground. Looking at a bird, we will find, if we take the conventional view, that it too has a head, limbs, and so on. But that is a thoroughly inartistic way of looking at things. I have often drawn attention to the fact that if we want to get to know the world, it will not be enough to grasp it with the intellect. We must develop an artistic way of seeing the world. If you do that, you certainly won't consider the, in quotes, head of a bird, so dwarfed and stunted when compared to the heads of other animals, to be a head in the true sense. Yes, if you take an external, excessively intellectual view, you may well say, quote, that bird has a head, a body, and limbs, close quote. But just consider how poorly developed are the legs of a bird in comparison, let us say, with those of a camel or an elephant, and how dwarfed its head when compared to that of a lion or a dog. There is hardly anything worth speaking of in a bird's head. Not much more, really, than would be the front part of the mouth in a dog or an elephant or a cat. I think it is fair to say that the bird's head is only slightly more elaborate than the front part of a mammal's mouth. As to the limbs of a mammal, they are completely atrophied in a bird. Certainly, if one takes an inartistic view, one may talk of the 4 legs of a bird as having been transformed into wings. But that is a thoroughly inartistic, unimaginative way of looking at things. If we really want to understand nature, really penetrate the cosmos, we must look more deeply. And above all, to the powers that create and shape the things of this world. The view that a bird too simply has a head, a body, and limbs will never help us to get a true picture, for instance, of the bird's etheric body. If we use imaginative perception To advance from the physical to the etheric aspect, the bird will prove to be nothing but a head in its etheric aspect. The etheric bird is nothing but a head. And from this point of view, it is immediately obvious that a bird cannot be compared to the head, body, and limbs of other animals, but must be regarded simply and solely as a head, a transformed head. The actual head of a bird represents merely the palate and front parts of the head, that is, the mouth parts. The parts of the bird's skeleton that look like ribs and spine must be considered to be head, though metamorphosed and transformed, it is true. The whole bird is really head. The point is that to understand the bird, we must go a very long way back in the planetary evolution of the earth. Birds have a long planetary history, much longer than camels, for example, which are of much later origin than any bird. More earthbound types of birds, such as the ostrich, evolved later than those that have the freedom of the air, eagles, vultures, which are very ancient creatures of the earth. In earlier earth, moon, and sun epochs, they certainly still had everything which then, passing from within outward as far as the skin, later developed in birds of today into what you see as feathers and a horny beak. I'm going to read that sentence again. In earlier earth, moon, and sun epochs, they certainly still had everything which then, passing from within outward as far as the skin, later developed in birds of today into what you see as feathers and a horny beak. The outer parts of birds are of a later origin. This is due to the fact that birds developed relatively early as head creatures. When they had to live under the conditions that came later in earth evolution, the feathers could only be added on the outside. The plumage was given to birds by the moon and the earth. The rest of the bird comes from much earlier epochs. There is, however, a much deeper aspect to this. Let us look at a bird in the air, an eagle, let us say, in its majestic flight. Under the influence of the sun's rays, it has received its plumage, rather like an outer gift of grace, and a horny beak. I'll come to the other effects of the sun's rays later. Let us look at the eagle as it flies in the air. It is subject to certain forces. The sun does not merely have the physical powers of light and heat that we normally speak of. When I spoke before of the Druid mysteries, I drew your attention to the fact that the sun also has non-physical powers. These are what we must consider. They give the different species of birds their rich and varied colors and specific form of plumage. When we penetrate the nature of the sun's action with spiritual perception, we come to see why the eagle has its particular plumage. We must then enter deeply into eagle nature and develop an inner, artistic feeling for it and for the spiritual element within it. We need to perceive how sun impulses, that are further enhanced by others, which I shall mention later, how sun impulses wash over the eagle, as it were, even before it emerges from the egg, and conjure out the feathers, or to be more exact, conjure them into its fleshy form. Only then may we ask ourselves, what significance does this have for us as human beings? The significance is that this is the same principle that makes the human brain the vehicle for thought. And you have the right insight into the macrocosm, into the great world of nature, if you are able to look at an eagle and say, the eagle has his plumage, his many-colored feathers. The power that is active in them is also active in me, and makes my brain the vehicle for thoughts. The power that creates the convolutions of the human brain and enables it to take up the inner salt force that provides the basis for the faculty of thought also gives the eagle in the air its feathers. Thus we become aware of a relationship to our thinking, aware of the human equivalent to the eagle's feathers in us. Our thoughts flow from the brain in the same way as the feathers stream out from the eagle. When we progress from the physical to the astral level, something of a paradox arises. On the physical plane, those powers cause feathers to develop. On the astral plane, they give rise to thoughts. Feathers are given to the eagle. That is the physical aspect of the process in which thoughts are formed. The thoughts given to human beings are the astral aspect of the development of feathers. Such things are sometimes indicated in a wonderful way through the genius of the vernacular, of common sayings. If a feather is cut off at the top and the contents are extracted, the country people in some German-speaking regions call this the, in quotes, soul. Some people will no doubt take this to be simply an outer term, but it is not. Anyone who understands these things will find that a feather holds something tremendous. It holds the secret of how thoughts are formed. Let us now turn away from the eagle that lives in the air and consider a mammal, taking the lion as a representative example. The lion can really only be understood if we develop a feeling for the joy, the inner satisfaction that lions have in living together with their whole environment. There is really no other animal, except for those related to the lion, which has such a wonderful, mysterious breathing process. In all animal nature, the breathing rhythms must harmonize with the rhythms of the blood circulation. The two rhythms differ in that the rhythms of the circulation grow heavy because of the digestive system that is tied up with them, and the breathing rhythms grow light in the endeavor to achieve the near weightless state of the physical brain. In birds, anything that lives in their breathing really lives at the same time in the head. A bird is all head, and in a way outwardly represents the head in the world. Its thoughts are in its plumage. For anyone with a real feeling for the beauties of nature, there is hardly anything more moving than to experience the inner connection between human thought, when it is really concrete, inwardly teeming with life, and the plumage of a bird. Anyone who is inwardly practiced in such things knows exactly when he is thinking like a peacock, when he is thinking like an eagle, or when he is thinking like a sparrow. Apart from the fact that the one is astral and the other physical, these things do actually correspond in a wonderful way. Those are the facts. And it may be said that breathing predominates to such an extent in a bird's life that other processes, the circulation and so on, are almost negligible. All the heaviness of digestion that imposes itself on the circulation is completely removed, done away with by the sense of itself in itself that the bird has. In the lion, a kind of balance exists between breathing and circulation. The lion's circulation is certainly also weighed down, but not as much as a camel's, for instance, or a cow's. In them, the digestion burdens the circulation to a tremendous degree. In the lion, whose digestive tract is comparatively short and is made in such a way that the digestive process is completed as rapidly as possible, digestion does not burden the circulation to any marked degree. On the other hand, the head principle has developed in such a way in the lion's head that breathing is held in balance with the rhythm of circulation. In lions, more than in any other animal, the inner rhythms of breathing and heartbeat are in inner balance and harmony. This is why lions, if we enter into what may be called their subjective life, have that particular way of devouring their food with unbridled voracity, literally gulping it down. They are simply glad to have got it down. They are ravenous for nourishment because it is part of their nature that hunger causes them much more pain than it causes other animals. They are greedy for nourishment, but they are not bent on being fastidious gourmets. They are not at all interested in taste sensation, but they are animals that find their inner satisfaction in the even rhythms of their breathing and circulation. It is only when the food has passed over into the blood which regulates the heartbeat, and when the heartbeat has come into reciprocal action with the breathing. It is a source of enjoyment to lions to draw breath and gives them deep inner satisfaction. It is only when they feel in themselves the result of their feeding, an inner balance between breathing and circulation, that lions are really in their element. They are wholly lion when they experience the deep inner satisfaction of the blood beating upward and of the breath pulsing downward. Lions are alive and in their element when these two wave movements come together. Look at a lion, how it runs, how it leaps, how the head is held, even the look in its eye, and you will see that all this arises from a continuous rhythmical interplay between getting out of balance and restoring balance again. Hardly anything else strikes us as more mysterious than the remarkable look in a lion's eye. So much is revealed there of inward mastery, the mastering of opposing forces. That is what we perceive in the look in a lion's eye, the heartbeat controlled by the breathing rhythm. And again, let those who have an artistic eye for form look at the shape of the lion's mouth. This shows how the heartbeat pulses upward as far as the mouth, but is held back by the breath. If you really picture the way the heartbeat and breathing come in touch with each other, you would arrive at the shape of the lion's mouth. The lion is all chest. In this animal, the rhythmical system comes to perfect expression, both in the outer form and in the way of life. Lions are organized in such a way that the interplay between heartbeat and breathing also comes to expression in the reciprocal relationship of heart and lungs. We really have to say, therefore, that if we look for what most closely resembles the bird in the human being, in metamorphosed form, of course, we come to the human head. If we look for what most closely resembles the lion, it is the region of the human chest, where the rhythms of circulation and breathing meet. Let us now turn our attention away from everything we perceive as the bird kingdom up there in the air, and from everything that lives in the circulation of the air in the immediate environment of the earth, for example, in the lion. Let us consider the ox or cow. I have frequently spoken of the pleasure to be gained from watching a herd of cattle lying replete and satisfied in a meadow, and from observing the process of digestion, which here again comes to expression in the position of the body, in the expression of the eyes, in every movement. Make the opportunity to observe a cow lying in the meadow, and its reaction when a noise comes from one direction or another. It is really marvelous to see how the animal raises its head, how in this lifting there lies the feeling that it is all heaviness, that it is not easy for a cow to lift its head, and there is something rather special going on. Seeing a cow in the meadow disturbed in this way, we cannot but say to ourselves, this cow is amazed at having to raise its head for anything but grazing. But why am I raising my head? I am not grazing, and there is no point in lifting my head unless it is to graze. Close quote. Just look at the way it happens. That is what goes on when a cow lifts its head. But it is not limited to the movement of the head. You cannot imagine a lion lifting its head the way the cow does. This lies in the shape of the head. And if we further observe the animal's whole form, we see that it is in fact what I may call a complete and utter digestive system. The weight of the digestion burdens the circulation to such a degree that it overwhelms everything to do with the head and breathing. The animal is all digestion. It is truly marvelous. If one looks with the eye of the Spirit, to turn one's gaze upward to the birds and then downward to the cow. Of course, you can lift a cow as high as you like. It will never be a bird. But if one could at the same time let the physical aspect of the cow be transformed into a form of air and moisture, first taking it up into the moist air that is in the immediate vicinity of the earth, and transforming the etheric configuration into one appropriate to the realm of moisture, and then raising the creature up higher and taking it as far as the astral, then the cow would be a bird up there in the heights. Astrally, it would be a bird. And you see, it is just here that a marvelous insight is gained, and we say to ourselves, what the bird up in the heights has by way of astrality, through its astral body, that is working, as I have said, to form the plumage, is something the cow has taken into flesh, muscle, and bone. Something that is astral in the bird has become physical in the cow. It does, of course, look different at the astral level, but this is so nevertheless. On the other hand, if I reversed the process and allowed the bird's astrality to come down, at the same time bringing about a transformation into the etheric and physical, the eagle would turn into a cow, because the astral element in the eagle is made flesh, a physical body, in the animal that lies on the ground when engaged in digestion. It is part of this digestive process in the cow to develop a wonderful astrality. The cow becomes beautiful in the process of digestion. Seen in its astral aspect, this digestive process has something infinitely beautiful. In the light of ordinary, mundane notions, Philistine ideas of perfection, the business of digestion is the lowest of the low. Yet one is proved utterly wrong in this, once a higher point of view is achieved, and one sees the digestive process in the cow with the eye of the Spirit. It is beautiful. It is magnificent. It is something of a tremendously spiritual nature. The lion does not attain to this spirituality, much less the bird. In the bird, the digestive process is something almost entirely physical. One does, of course, find the etheric body in the digestive system of the bird, but there is very little astrality, almost none. Compared to this, the digestive processes of the cow are in astral terms quite stupendous, an entire world. If we now want to look for similar things in the human being, for something corresponding to what in the cow is a one-sided development, the physical embodiment of a certain astral element, we find it in the human digestive organs and their continuation in the limbs, harmoniously interwoven with what else is there. The things I see in the eagle high in the air above me, and in the animal that rejoices in the air around him the way the lion does, and in the animal connected with earth forces that come from below ground and are active also in the digestive organs, that is, if I look not up to the heights but down into the depths, entering into the nature of the cow with real understanding, I find all three configurations united into one, harmonized and balanced in the human being. I find the metamorphosis of the bird in the human head, the metamorphosis of the lion in the human chest, and the metamorphosis of the cow in the digestive system and the limbs. Once again, utterly metamorphosed, utterly transformed. If today we contemplate these things and realize again that man is actually born out of the whole of nature, that he bears the whole of nature within him, as I have shown, that he bears the bird kingdom, the lion kingdom, the essential nature of the cow in him, then we have the individual aspects of what is expressed in the abstract sentence, man is a microcosm. He is indeed a microcosm, and the macrocosm is in him. And all the creatures that live in the air, all the creatures on the face of the earth whose special element is the air that circulates there, and the animals whose special element is below the surface of the earth in the forces of gravity, all these work together in man as an harmonious whole. So that man is synthesis of eagle, lion, and ox or cow. When these things are researched and rediscovered through a modern science of the invisible, of the spirit, one gains that great respect for old instinctive clairvoyant insight into the cosmos of which I have often spoken. Respect for the mighty vision that man consists of eagle, lion, and cow or ox, which harmonized in true proportion, together form the human being in his wholeness. But before I go on, this may be tomorrow, to discuss the separate impulses, for example, that are active in the forces streaming around the eagle, around the lion, around the cow, I want to speak of another correspondence between man's inner being and what is outside in the cosmos. What we have learned so far can lead us to this. When the human head looks for what accords with its nature, it must direct its gaze upward to the bird kingdom. The human chest, the heartbeat, the breathing must, if it desires to grasp itself as one of the secrets of nature, turn its gaze to such a thing as the nature of the lion. And man must try to understand his metabolic system from the constitution, from the organization of the ox or cow. But in his head, man has the vehicle for his thoughts. In the chest, the vehicle for his feelings. And in his metabolic system, the vehicle for the will. So that, in his soul nature too, man is an image of the thoughts that move through the world with the birds and find expression in their plumage, of the world of feeling that encircles the earth, which is to be found in the lion, in the balanced life of heartbeat and breathing. These latter are toned down in man, but still represent the quality of inner courage. In ancient Greek has the term euxia, to be of good courage, for these qualities of heart and chest. And if man wishes to find the will impulses that are predominantly connected with the metabolism, to give them outer form, he looks to what has become flesh in the cow. Something that may sound grotesque or paradoxical today and seem almost insane in an age where there is no longer any real understanding for the spiritual connections in the world, nevertheless contains a kernel of truth that goes back to ancient traditions. Mahatma Gandhi, he has now been presented to the world in somewhat rough and ready fashion in a pretty awful book by Romain Rolland, is a man who certainly directs his activities entirely to outer affairs, but at the same represents something like an 18th century rationalist among the Indian people and in terms of the ancient Hindu religion. The remarkable phenomenon is that he has nevertheless actually retained the veneration of the cow in his enlightened Hinduism. This cannot be set aside, says Mahatma Gandhi, who, as you know, was sentenced to 6 years' imprisonment by the British for his political activities in India. He still retains the veneration of the cow. Things such as these, which have so tenaciously persisted in more spiritual cultures, can only be understood when one is aware of the inner connections, when one really knows the tremendous secrets that lie in the ruminating animal, in the cow. Then we can understand why people come to venerate in the cow a sublime astrality that has, as it were, become earthly, and only in this respect more lowly. Such things enable us to understand the religious veneration paid to the cow in Hinduism, while the whole bevy of rationalistic and intellectualistic concepts which have been brought to bear on this subject will never enable us to understand it. And so we see how will, feeling, and thought can be looked for outside in the cosmos and correspondingly in the microcosm of the human being. There are, however, all kinds of other forces in the human being and outside in the world of nature too. I would ask you to take particular note of the following. Consider the metamorphoses undergone by the creature which finally becomes a butterfly. As you know, the butterfly lays its egg, and from that egg a caterpillar emerges. The egg completely encloses and contains everything that later gives rise to the butterfly. The caterpillar emerges from the egg into light irradiated air. That is the environment into which the caterpillar comes. The important thing is to note that the caterpillar really lives in the sunlit air. This is something you should study when you are lying in bed at night and have lit the lamp, and a moth flies toward the lamp and finds its death in the light. The effect of the light on the moth is such that it accepts that it has to seek its death. There you see how light acts on something that lives. The caterpillar, I am only referring to this briefly today. Tomorrow and the next day we'll go into more detail, cannot reach the source of light, which is the sun, in order to cast itself into it, but would like to do so. It wants it just as much as the moth does, which casts itself into the flame of your bedside candle, and there meets its death in a physical fire. The caterpillar seeks the flame just as eagerly, the flame which comes toward it from the sun. But it cannot throw itself into the sun, so its passage into heat, into light, is therefore a spiritual act for the caterpillar. The whole of the sun's action passes to the caterpillar as a spiritual activity. It follows every single sunbeam, this caterpillar. By day it follows the sunbeams. The moth casts itself into the flame in one moment, giving the whole of its moth substance over to the light. The caterpillar gradually weaves its caterpillar substance into the light, pauses at night, weaves by day, and spins and weaves a whole cocoon around itself. The cocoon, the threads of the cocoon, are what the caterpillar weaves out of its own substance as it spins on in the flood of sunlight. And so the caterpillar, once it has become a chrysalis, has woven around itself, out of its own substance, the sunbeams to which it has merely given physical substance. The moth is consumed quickly in the physical fire. The caterpillar, sacrificing itself, casts itself into the sunlight and weaves around itself the threads of the sunbeams, following the direction in which they go at any given moment. If you look at a silkworm cocoon, you are looking at woven sunlight, but sunlight given physical form from the substance of the silk-spinning caterpillar itself. The result is an enclosed inner space, so that outer sunlight has, in a sense, been overcome. You'll remember that when I described the Druid mysteries, I spoke of the sunlight which enters the cromlechs, becoming inward. The sun, which previously exerted its physical power, causing the caterpillar to spin its own cocoon, now exerts power on what is inward, and out of this inner nature creates the butterfly, which then emerges. Then the whole cycle begins again. Here you have spread out before you in sequence what is contracted in a bird's egg. Compare the whole process with what happens when a bird lays its eggs. Inside the bird itself, in a process that has undergone metamorphosis, a chalky eggshell develops around the egg. The forces of the sunlight make use of the substance of the calcium carbonate to bring together in one process what is a whole sequence of egg, caterpillar, and cocoon in the case of the butterfly. with processes that otherwise are separated into different stages, thus brought together, the whole of the bird's embryonic development is different. In the bird, the first 3 stages are one, whereas in the butterfly we have the separate, outwardly visible stages of egg, caterpillar, and chrysalis, cocoon, with the butterfly finally emerging. Now, what do we see if we follow the whole process at the astral level? The bird's whole form represents a human head, the organ where thoughts are evolved. What does the butterfly represent? It too lives in the airy element, but its embryonic development is a great deal more complex. It becomes apparent that the butterfly represents a continuation of the head function. It represents the forces of the head extended, as it were, to the whole human being. Something happens in the human being which corresponds to a different process in nature from that of bird development. If we include the etheric and astral elements, the human head can be seen to have one function that is very similar to the one in which an egg is produced, except that it has been metamorphosed. However, if we only had this one function, our thoughts would all be momentary. They would no longer go down inside us, involve the whole human being, and then rise up again as memories. If I look at the momentary thoughts which I have in response to the outside world, and then look up to the eagle, I say, in the eagle's feathers I see thoughts that outside myself have taken physical form. In me they are thoughts, but only momentary thoughts. If I look to what I bear in me as memories, I find a more complicated process. Down below in the physical body, a process similar to the development of an egg occurs, though in the etheric it is something quite different. An inner process similar to the outer development of the caterpillar. In the astral body it bears an inner resemblance to the development of a chrysalis, a cocoon. The process in which I perceive something that triggers a thought which is pushed down is similar to the way in which a butterfly lays its egg. The process of transformation is similar to what happens in the case of the caterpillar. The life in the etheric body offers itself to the light of the spirit, weaves an inner astral cocoon, as it were, around the thought, and the memories emerge from this. If we see the bird's plumage in our momentary thoughts, we must see the butterfly's wing, shimmering with color, as something that at the spiritual level evolves in our remembered thoughts. Thus we look around us and feel to what an immense degree nature is related to us. We think and we see the world of thoughts and the flying birds. We remember, we have memories, and see the world of memory images that live in us in the fluttering butterflies shimmering in the sunlight. Yes, man is a microcosm, and contains within himself the secrets of the macrocosm. And it is indeed true that the things we perceive inwardly, our thoughts, feelings, will, impulses, and memory pictures, seen from the other side, outside in the macrocosm, can be found again in the realm of nature. That is what it means to look at reality. Reality of this kind cannot be grasped by mere thoughts, for to them reality is a matter of indifference. Only logic counts where they are concerned. But this same logic can be used to prove almost anything and everything in the real world. Let me close by giving you an example of this, giving you a picture that will form a bridge to what we will be considering tomorrow. An African tribe, the Philatus, have a very beautiful fable from which much can be learned. Quote, "Once upon a time a lion, a wolf, and a hyena set out on a journey. They met an antelope. The antelope was torn to pieces by one of the animals. The 3 travelers were good friends, and now the question arose as to how they should divide the dismembered antelope between them. First, the lion said to the hyena, 'You divide it.' Close quote. The hyena had its own logic. It is an animal that deals not with the living, but with the dead. Its logic is no doubt determined by the measure of its courage, or rather lack of courage. Depending on this, it approaches reality in one way or another. Continue quote. The hyena said, "We'll divide the antelope into 3 equal parts, one for the lion, one for the wolf, and one for myself." Then the lion fell upon the hyena and killed it. That was the end of the hyena. The antelope still had to be shared out. So the lion said to the wolf, "Look here, my dear wolf, we'll have to share it out differently now. You divide it. How would you share it out?" Then the wolf said, "Yes, we must now apportion it differently. There can't be equal shares like before. Since you have rid us of the hyena, you, as the lion, must of course have the first third. The second would have been yours in any case, as the hyena said. And the remaining third shall be yours because you are the wisest and bravest of all animals." That is how the wolf apportioned it. Then said the lion, "Who taught you to divide in this way?" To which the wolf replied, "The hyena taught me." Close quote. So did the lion not devour the wolf, but according to the wolf's logic, took all 3 portions for himself. The mathematics, the intellectual element, was the same with the hyena and the wolf. Each divided the antelope into 3 parts. But they differed in the way they applied this to reality, and that meant a major difference also to their destinies. The hyena was devoured because its application of the principle of division to reality had different results from that of the wolf. The wolf was not devoured because it applied hyena logic. It freely admitted that it had been taught by the hyena to quite another reality. It applied it to reality in such a way that the lion no longer felt compelled to devour it. So you get first of all hyena logic, and then hyena logic also in the wolf. But the intellectual, logical element becomes something quite different when applied to reality. That is how it is with all abstractions. You can do anything you like with abstractions, applying them to reality in one way or another. And it is important, therefore, that we are able to see reality in the correspondence between man as microcosm and the macrocosm. We must be able to study the human being not merely by applying logic, but in a sense which can never be achieved unless intellectualism is taken onward into the artistic element in the world. If you succeed in bringing about the metamorphosis of intellectualism into artistic perception, and are able to develop this artistic approach into an instrument of perception, you will find in the outer macrocosm the phenomena that exist in the human being, though transformed there from how they manifest in the natural world. Then you will find that man is related to the macrocosm in a very true and real sense. The end of Lecture 1.